From Anne Arundel Community College in Arnold, Maryland, this is a special edition of Riverhawk Report, a podcast sponsored by Campus Current, the college's student newspaper. My name is Daniel Nickerson. I'm a fourth-year graphic design major at Anne Arundel Community College. Today's podcast was inspired by The Daily, a podcast by the New York Times that is hosted by journalist Michael Barbaro. On October 10th, Mr. Barbaro hosted an episode of The Daily called Who is Believed and Who is Blamed? That episode featured a conversation with 4 female high school students who talked about their reaction to the confirmation of Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, who had been accused of sexually assaulting a teenage friend when he was 17 and in high school. We have recreated that conversation with 4 Anne Arundel Community College students. I asked the 4 women the same questions that Mr. Barbaro asked the high school girls. Plus, I asked our group one additional question at the end. Thank you for listening. I want to bring this back to you and your lives. At the center of the Kavanaugh allegation is a high school party. High school students drinking beer on a summer afternoon inside a house. And I wonder how familiar that scene is to all of you.
So, for me, I come from like a strict household with a military family, and I didn't really go to a lot of high school parties until my last year of high school. And then when I went, of course, it was a change for me, it was wow, this is a different world, you know what I'm saying? Because I was involved in sports, you know what I'm saying? So I was just an athlete. I was in that world. And then entering this world where I see these people just kind of drinking and smoking weed and just in this having this outer body experience, being so happy and being so comfortable. It was weird for me because it was how can you be so comfortable around these people you barely know? You know what I'm saying? These people you barely know, you're under the influence, people coming in with their friends, not leaving with their friends. And you just see people you know of that you see walking in the hallway turn into these different type of people. They're starting to get a little closer to you. They're starting to watch you from a distance, and I don't know. It was just weird for me. And I think that's why I never missed that scene, because it wasn't comfortable for me. It was uncomfortable. I just couldn't find myself in a space where it was okay to just be dancing on anybody or kissing somebody in the bathroom or just stupid stuff that, you know what I'm saying, that I feel would have put me in a bad position.
Yeah, the parties that were at my high school, there were lots of people who you did know. It was a familiar crowd who went to the parties. But it was so weird because everyone knew all of these people who went to the parties, and they still did really gross stuff. I remember the morning after parties, there would always be the embarrassing picture of that one girl with her top half off, and it was oh, ha ha ha, look what happened to her, that's so funny. But that boys are saving those pictures to their phones or doing something awful with them. And then I remember they would play games, who can you how fast can you grab every single person in the room on their butt. And it was so joking, haha, you can't avoid, I don't know, Kyle doing this. But it was I'm sure one of those girls didn't want that to happen, even if they were drunk. So,
Right, and I think it's an atmosphere where it feels so temporary. So at the time, you don't want to say that you're uncomfortable, but then after the fact, you think about it and you realize, I probably should have said something because that was really uncomfortable, and I'm sure I wasn't the only one. Right. So I think when you're around peers, you don't want to embarrass yourself. You don't want to say, don't touch me, or that was inappropriate, or that made me uncomfortable, or what do you think you're doing? You just keep your mouth shut because you want to belong. And I think that is a dangerous territory to be in.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I also, like, even if it's not a party, but mainly like a small hangout with your friends, I think that's more relatable. But, like, there would be times when just boys who I was very close with who would just touch me, and I was like, what are you doing? And they just think it's like a joke.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, it's not a joke. I don't understand how, like, just because it's super late, or just because we're friends, or just because I'm wearing this shirt does not make you have the rights to do that.
Yeah. And it's just like what you were saying about, like, you know, not wanting to feel uncomfortable and wanting to belong, because it's just like, dang, if I say something, like, are people going to think that I'm being, am I doing too much? Like, am I being excessive? You know what I'm saying? Being looked at as an outcast. And it's just like, nobody wants to be looked at as an outcast, first of all. And then what you were saying about, like, how your guy friends just think that it's okay to touch you just because of the setting you're in, because the setting that you're in are what you're wearing. It's like, we are still, like, you know what I'm saying, we're just friends, you know what I'm saying? I never gave you permission. And even if you don't send signals that, like, if you don't get closer to them, they'll get closer to you. So if you're not sending those signals of wanting to be touched or wanting to be filled, they'll still come back and say, oh, well, I just thought, since when you sat down, you sat next to me.
Yeah.
There's 5 chairs in here. Other people were sitting in them. So I just think that, like, anytime, like, we as women voice our opinion about uncomfortability, especially when it comes to sexual aggressiveness in any form, it's like, sit down. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not that big of a deal, girl. Like, be quiet. It's always, like, just push to the side, and it's crazy.
And, like, my friends, like, my girlfriends in that group, I would say, like, hey, did you notice, like, him being a little touchy last night? And they're like, oh, that's just how he is. He's just flirty. And I was like, that's not just how he is. Like, that's not okay. And, you know, maybe if me and one other girl is experiencing it and you're not experiencing it, don't just call it off as touchy or flirty. You know, if it makes you uncomfortable, then that's just not okay.
So, when you all had those experiences or knew people who did any of you find that you wanted to talk about these encounters and you found that people around you weren't believing them, or they had questions that made you wonder if they believed you, or you just felt left unheard?
Like, when I was a server, it was just so, like, expected, you know, to just be harassed constantly. And, you know, like, old men would just ask me these ridiculous questions of, you know, oh, you wear that at work, what do you wear when you aren't working, things like that. And I was like, I'm like 16 years old, you know, and when you tell your coworkers about it, they're like, wait, you're gonna get a good tip, so don't say anything back. Or you tell your manager, that's like just a part of the job, you're gonna have to suck it up. And I'm like, that's just not okay.
So I work as a bartender, and I had this one experience with this one guy. He wouldn't let it go. Like, he flirted with me constantly. He'd constantly tell me, oh, you're too cute for this, or oh. And then one time I was sitting down after work, and he sat next to me, and then he, like, would put his arm on me, or like, and I was like, please back off. And he was like the one person who I was always afraid of, like, I finally reached a point where I was like, don't. And at that point, he kind of just gave me this look, and it was from that moment on, I was like, I really felt like I had to watch out when I went to my car that night. Like, what if he just showed up? Like, he gave off that weird, well, you said no, but if I want it, I'll go after it kind of vibe. It was very strange.
It's always the worst when they they just don't stop, you know, when it's like she's gonna give in.
Yeah, and they try to just act like they don't notice it. Like it's just like we're making it up in our heads or something, like, and then when we say like, don't touch me, or like, no, it's like they're surprised. Like we're supposed to be like this objective tool at their disposal just because we're in this environment. Or just like what you guys were saying, like being a server and a bartender, I work at a shoe store. So in those instances, we're doing a service for someone else. You know what I'm saying? And since we're at work, it's kind of like one of those the customer's always right type of thing. So like you put yourself in a situation like that, they feel like they can do no wrong. They feel like they can say what they want, do what they want, tell you what they want, and there'll be no consequences. And then if you defend yourself or you give them a different type of vibe, you're the crazy one. You're the bad guy for saying something. And it's ridiculous because it's like, it's not my fault that you're perf.
I think we're already conditioned to not be believed. I think we already approach parties and approach social situations knowing that if something goes wrong, we're going to have to fight to be heard. Because I've personally heard stories from other girls my age who, at four-year schools, who drank just as much as the boys drank, and someone will take advantage of them and they will say no, and then when they come back to fight it and say, I said no, all of their friends will turn against them and say, I don't know, I wasn't there. Well, what I saw, she was drinking way too much. Well, she was slurring her speech. Well, she was this and that. Well, you should have seen how she was dressed. It's ridiculous. And it doesn't matter the circumstances that you put yourself in. If it comes down to a point of being uncomfortable and you say no and somebody continues to sexually harass you, it is not your fault. You can completely undress and say no, and it is not your fault.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter. So I think it is very difficult to understand why in today's society you have to defend yourself so much when situations like that happen. Like from just hearing her stories, it was like very difficult for anybody to believe her. She almost gave up and was like, whatever, because nobody was taking her seriously at all. And I think when you look at things like walking down the street, having your finger on your mace, I remember since I was pretty young, my mom's teaching me, when you walk to your car when you get older and you drive, always put your keys between your fingers so that if somebody grabs you from behind, and teaching me all these crazy little like tricks to defend myself. And you realize once you get a little bit older, boys don't learn that. There's this code that girls have. When you go to parties, don't walk by yourself. Don't show too much skin. Don't get with somebody alone in a room. Like stuff that's just like, why aren't we teaching men don't sexually harass? Like that's it's not going both ways.
She says no, it's no.
Right. Girls are to go out into the world and always surround yourself with other girls and always keep your purse stuck to your side and don't hold it down. Like little things. And it's not going both ways. Men aren't being taught, don't sexually harass, don't make girls uncomfortable, don't touch her if she doesn't want to be touched. So, of course, when situations happen where there's accusations of somebody sexually harassing you, it's always going to be in the man's favor because you're giving them that power automatically. You're being trained that they have power over you in every situation. So I think it's a slippery slope for girls, especially young girls, high school age girls, because you're already saying, I know how hard it's going to be for me to be understood if something goes wrong. I'm going to have to explain myself so much more than he's going to have to explain himself.
And like hopefully with this trial, you know, we think about that, you know, how boys are raised, and hopefully with this trial, high school boys are seeing, hey, maybe I shouldn't do this. Maybe I shouldn't drink this much and black out. You know, maybe I shouldn't make that girl uncomfortable. Maybe I shouldn't play that game. Maybe I shouldn't take those pictures just because it's just not fair.
Mm-hmm. And the sickest thing, I think for me that I just thought about is I've actually spoken with someone, like I won't say their name or how in relation they are to me, but I've spoken with someone who's admitted to, you know what I'm saying? Yes, there has been times where I was drinking and I may have thought I had a better chance with the woman because she was drinking.
Mm-hmm.
Not even in the necessary sense that I knew I could take this woman home and have sex with her because she was drinking. It's like alcohol makes you a target.
Mm-hmm.
It makes you more vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And if men see that, they're going to pounce. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that, you know what I'm saying, someone could admit just, you know what I'm saying, thinking that they'll have a better chance of talking to them or approaching them is just like, well, what about the real psychos? You know what I'm saying? Like the men who think like, oh yeah, I'm going to get this girl because she was drinking, or maybe I'll slip something in there to make her a little bit more. You know what I'm saying?
That's another
Yeah.
whole level.
Yeah.
So I just want to shift focus here to a pretty sensitive question, especially given what we just heard. One of the conversations surrounding these accusations against Brett Kavanaugh is that this was high school. So how much weight should it carry given that context? I'm curious what you think. As college freshmen and sophomores, should what you did in high school, should what you do now, should what anyone does in high school or college now follow you around for the rest of your lives?
Yes. Yes. Because it does. You know what I'm saying? It does. What the decisions you make always eternally like have this snowball effect. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? If you have sex with someone, you can get pregnant, you can get an STD. Anything can happen from any decision that you make in life. If you get a car accident when you just start learning to drive, that's something on your record. You get arrested, that's something on your record. That puts you in a lesser chance of finding a better job. I just feel like not even just because of this, not even just because it's Kavanaugh, or just because it's a sexual harassment conversation, that I'm saying to myself, yeah, if this happened, but it does. They just put, you know what I'm saying, Bill Cosby in jail for the allegations of raping women, you know what I'm saying, when he was in jail. And I mean, well, now he's in jail, you know what I'm saying, because of these allegations from different women. And that's another thing. When you are at this, I don't believe the world is black and white. I believe the world is very colorful. Mm-hmm. But there are times where we all know, of course, where the white man is superior in every type of way, like to women, to people of different ethnicities. And this is just another form of his superiority, because anybody else, what they do in high school is going to follow them. But just because this is a white man in a position of power, there's no consequence.
Right, and I think that it's not okay to be, I think when you're a little kid, you make a lot of mistakes, and then you grow up and you realize, oh, I didn't even realize I was making those mistakes. But when you're as old as being in high school and college, and you're aware that what I'm doing isn't right because of this reason, and you just continue to do it because you figure the time will pass and you'll be able to just let it go and nobody will remember. If you know you're doing something wrong and you continue to do something wrong, there's not a justification for that. You can't say, oh, well, I didn't even realize what I was doing was wrong, because you do. You're just choosing to continue to do that and think that because it's typical for your age, it's okay. Because a lot of people make those same mistakes and make those same foul judgments, it's okay for you to do it too. But if you know you're doing something wrong, there's no explanation for it. You can't expect it to not follow you around because it's part of who you are. It sets a tone for your future actions.
And don't you think it's funny that in the trial he could list off every single Catholic girls' school? You know, like, it was just,
That's weird.
You know that it happened. Like, I know that something happened. And, you know, what you were saying, if it was any other guy, you know, I feel like that he would be locked up. And, you know, people are saying about Bill Cosby, oh, he's too old to go to jail. He's too old to go to jail when he raped women. It does not matter. It does not matter.
It does not matter.
And it is just some other form of nonsense that we are just conforming that rape is okay in our society depending on, like, how young you are and if you're in high school or how old you are. And it is just, it's ridiculous.
It just goes back to what you were saying, that, like, you know what you're doing is wrong. So, Bill Cosby, Kavanaugh, I won't list any other names, but the hundreds of them who knew what they were doing, it's never too late to get a repercussion. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's times where people get in car accidents and their cases go on forever. There's murder trials that go on forever. But a woman gets on a trial for sexual harassment. We need to get this off the news. This needs to be done with. We need to close this case. This is not a big deal. This doesn't need to be further investigated. It's just always held at a lesser, and I feel like that's the position that women have always been in, and it kind of infuriates you a little bit. It's because if you think about it, I won't say that we're the reason why this green earth is still standing, but but I just feel like women were so nurturing, you know what I'm saying? And just in any environment for us to be treated the way we're treated is just like inhumane almost, and it's ridiculous.
And you know what? Like, after this Kavanaugh trial, like, let's hold sexual assault cases to the same standards that we hold car accident cases to. Like, is that too much to ask for?
Yeah.
That, I just, it's ridiculous.
I feel like when you're young, to be held to your actions is a double-edged sword. When we were all young, we were told, if you go out to a party, don't show too much skin, wear the right clothes, blah, 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 blah. You have one photo taken of you on social media, it'll always be there.
Yeah.
But a guy could be posted all over social media doing dumb shit, and they could still get that great job, but we won't. And I think that's a problem that really needs to be adjusted, is why am I being told that what I do now will have effects on me, and it will. But a guy who's being told the same thing, it won't. And I feel like that's actually a thing. Like, I don't think that's just me. I think that's a well-known fact, is that if we're told not to, it won't happen. But if he's told not to, it won't matter.
Yeah. Oh.
And this isn't a situation of, remember that time in high school when I cheated on that quiz and, that's, no one really cares.
No job.
It's like, we're talking about, remember that time I raped that girl? I was so young and dumb. It's never going to follow me. They're not on the same level. You can't expect things like that to be dismissed, and they are. The reason that people men don't expect that those things to follow them through life is because they don't. Is because of they get away with it. Because they never have to be accountable. So if you see a pattern of not being accountable why would you think that it's going to follow you? I don't blame any men for not thinking that they're going to be reminded of those things because they aren't. So why would they think that it's going to follow them if they're seeing a trail in society, especially of men in power, of it not ever affecting them in their future life? If they see these powerful men, oh, they're able to have this job and they did the same dumb stuff that I did, okay, then why should I feel like this is going to haunt me? Clearly, it's not going to affect me because it's not. Like, if they're seeing that it's not an issue, of course you're not going to think it's an issue, especially while you're doing it. You're not going to think it's a problem if you don't see it as a risk of negatively affecting your future. You're just going to continue to do what you're doing.
Yeah, and it's crazy when we talk about how, like, being young, you know what I'm saying? You don't really, like, know what you're doing, but I know this is kind of off topic but still on topic. There was a case about this little boy. His name was Emmett Till, and he was accused of whistling at this white woman at a store, and she told someone, and a group of people went into his home while he was sleeping, pulled him out of his house, hung him in the woods, beat him, and left his water in the lake to rotten. And this was a little boy. You know what I'm saying? There was no trial for him. There was no testimony for this woman. So then we're looking at an alternative universe. Well, why people don't believe women? You know what I'm saying? Because then some women lie.
Yeah.
And that's just the truth. They find themselves in situations where they don't know how to get out of a situation, so they lie. And it's not just, of course, women who do it, but when it comes to sexual harassment, there is an alternate. You know what I'm saying? There is an alternate universe where men aren't doing these things and women are lying. But then those cases are looked at more.
Yeah.
Those are held at a bigger standard. Those are the ones that matter to people, not the situations where women are telling the truth, going to bed every night crying, traumatized for the rest of their lives, having babies out of sexual harassment where they were raped and having to care for this child and nurture for this child. Those, nobody cares about those stories. But, she lied. So why would we ever believe any other woman who tries to tell us a story like this? You know what I'm saying? And it's just so crazy because people always believe what they want to believe.
Yeah.
Then I wonder what you think the message was when Brett Kavanaugh was confirmed. Many of you have talked about experiences that have happened to you or people that you know that were assaulted, and given the fact that he was accused of that, and then he was put on the nation's highest court, what's the message to you?
Well, I think it sort of follows that whole dynamic of the way boys are raised and the way girls are raised. I think when you look at these situations and you say, oh, something needs to change, electing him is basically saying, no, they don't. Things are fine the way they are, and they're going to continue to be the way they are. Things aren't going to follow you. You can still, as a man, you can still get away with sexual misconduct, and as women, you're still going to have to struggle to be believed. This is not changing things. This is saying that it's the way that things are right now for women regarding sexual assault are acceptable. The way that cases are being handled is acceptable.
When I heard that when he was confirmed, it reminded me of a night that I was talking with my mom. Someone close to me. She was really young. And was actually assaulted by a guy she was dating at the time. And my mom didn't understand why she wouldn't come up and say something about it when it happened. And I had just come home from college, and I spent 2 years at a school where a lot of the students there were in school for intelligence. The school I went to was the only school in the country who offered that program to military. And all of these kids were fighting for these jobs where they would be really high up. And a lot of them went to parties, and a lot of them had stuff about them where people were like, oh, well, don't be near him at a party. And my mom didn't understand why someone would not say something. And I'm going to make it very clear, I was never assaulted in my life. But in that moment, I turned to her and I said, if I was assaulted at a party, why would I say something? Because they're not going to be found out. I'm going to be told, well, your skirt was too short or your shirt was too low. And it's true. That's what, and I'm talking about this because these kids were fighting for these jobs that were just as high up as his. And if one of them had assaulted someone, no one would have cared. And that just says that no one cares. So.
And I think when you look at other positions of power, aside from just political, you look at cultural things like athletes who are leaders to a lot of people, and you see people that were accused of sexual assault that it's just they continue to be idolized. And I'm not necessarily saying Kavanaugh's idolized. I certainly don't think that's the case, but I think there is nothing saying right now in the world, if you sexually assault somebody, you don't have the right to be put on a pedestal. You need to be punished for your actions. There's nothing saying that because there's people continue to stay at a level where they're supposed to be guiding others. And I think it's to put somebody in a position of power that has been accused of sexual assault gives them the power to have some sort of moral message that they're supposed to be sending to people that maybe aren't in as high as positions of them. If you're a leader, you're supposed to be helping other people understand maybe things they don't understand, or how to get to your level, or how to grow, teaching them lessons that they don't know yet because they're less experienced than you. So when you're putting somebody in any kind of leadership role that's been accused of that, they've been accused of sexual assault, how are you supposed to portray that person as credible for anything? If they're not held responsible for their actions, why would you trust anything else they say? It's not just about the sexual assault. There's a certain strength that I think it takes to admit your wrongs and to take accountability. And I think when sticky situations come up and the power outweighs the moral aspect of it, like you're saying, it's more important. I think this is saying it's more important to have somebody powerful than to have somebody who's honest. Like, it's the power is more important than, you know, the truth. The power is more important than anything emotional that anybody's going through. Having somebody in power is more important. And I think that's a shame, because I think it silences a lot of women. And I think for the rest of time, they're going to continue, like you were saying, they're going to continue not to say anything because you don't see a point. Eventually, you do not see a point. You do not see that anything's going to change, so you don't see a point in continuing to fight for something that's not going to cause change.
And, like, when I couldn't stop watching the trials. And when it was over, you know, my parents, who so closely watched Anita Hill, you know, they looked at me and they said, you know, this is so important, you know, just remember this. Like, I'm going to remember this as following up Me Too and that amazing movement, and that this case that just is just gone, you know, like, it just makes me so angry, because we just went through this whole movement of, you know, women coming out and speaking against the men who attacked them, and it's such a hard time for men. Men are so afraid to compliment women. But then we have this guy who probably did something on the Supreme Court. You know, what does that say? What does it say that we have a president who has been accused? What does that say about us? That we're just okay with this as society.
And it almost treats those movements like a joke.
It does.
Yes. Like, it's like, oh, that was silly. That was like a cute little thing that those girls tried to do, but let's get back to the real business.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter. Nobody really holds value in anything that they were saying. Because if that were the case, things would change.
Exactly.
When somebody starts fighting back for themselves, it's not fair to selectively believe them and to choose, well, right now it's not about who's going to be in office, so we'll give them their voice and we'll validate their movement. But then when it comes down to politics, it's not convenient for us to believe them, so we're just going to push it aside. It always needs to matter, not just in some cases. It's not fair to say, well, if we're looking at this rape case at a 4-year university, we'll believe this girl because this is a hot issue right now, and we want to make sure our school looks good, so we'll get this kid kicked out. And I've seen that happen with friends.
Right.
We'll get him out because now that this issue is going to make our school look bad. Right.
Yeah.
We need to keep our name clean. We'll get him out. I've seen it. I've seen it happen. But why is that not translating into the government? Why is it okay for him to just be elected? Why is that not being treated? It's all the same. No person is more valuable than another person. So why, when you're a college student and you're saying, I was raped, and you're giving all of this evidence, how come it's not the same as somebody wants to be elected for office and somebody from their past is coming and saying, listen, I was treated badly, this is not okay? Why is it not treated the same? Why is it more acceptable if you can contribute something to the government? I don't understand that. Everybody is on the same playing field in this world. I don't understand. No case of sexual assault is different. You can have, levels where maybe somebody was raped versus they were just groped, or maybe, it's all on a scale, but that doesn't mean it's more or less important than anyone else. So I don't understand why we're able to pick apart these cases and decide when they're important and when they're not, because they all need to be important all of the time, not just sometimes.
Yes.
I think it's also important to know that the people that there was a majority of, was it the full House, or is it just the Senate that there was a majority of the Senate that when these allegations were brought up, flat out said, it doesn't matter if it's right or wrong. We already know who we're voting. Like, we already know we're gonna vote yes. And I think that makes a statement saying that there is a very high chance that this happened.
Mm-hmm.
And the majority of the Senate decided to say it doesn't matter in the face of all of this, that they're still going to vote yes.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't sound good. That isn't right.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you want to back someone up just because their personal views will match up with what you want to have accomplished while you're still in Senate? Just because they're willing to turn over certain things that you want turned over, you're going to throw out the window that he assaulted someone in high school?
Mm-hmm.
And then 3 other people came forward, and you're still going to say it never happened?
Mm-hmm.
That this is all one big show to harm him? What about the women whose voices were never heard? Like, that's not okay.
And I can see how I really can understand why it would be frustrating for him to think, well, this is something I did a long time ago. That doesn't make me less qualified for this position. And that's true. It doesn't make him less qualified for the position. I'm sure he still has all of the necessary skills and he still has all the plans. And I can feel how that would be frustrating to be told, why are we electing him? Well, you're not electing him based on his character. Essentially, you're electing him based on what he's going to do for the government and what his plans are. And that I can see how that would be frustrating to have to address something so far from your past that really has nothing to do with your job and try to, make people understand why it's not relevant to your job. And that's understandable, but I think when you separate those things too often, like when you have all of these cases of, oh, well, I'm a director and they're an actress and there was sexual misconduct, but the fact that that happened has nothing to do with the fact that I want to direct films. Like those kind of cases. Or I'm an athlete and the fact that I sexually assaulted this girl, I understand that that's a touchy subject, but I want to play football no matter what. I can see that difference, but if you split those things up too much, I think you never learn the lesson of don't sexually assault women. Like you don't learn the lesson. That is connected to you because it's part of who you are. I think once you sexually assault a girl, that says something about who you are. And I think when it's brought to your attention, yes, it might not have anything to do with your job. It might not have anything to do with, your life at that time. You may have done it one time 10 years ago and never done it since. It's still sending a message that that's not something that matters enough to affect areas of your life that aren't directly correlated to it anymore. So those things need to be connected. You need to continue to connect sexual assault with things that don't seem relevant at all, because it is relevant. It's part of who you are. It's part of what message you're sending to anybody who comes after you. So to elect somebody into office who was accused of that, yes, it doesn't it was a long time ago, and I can see that it would be frustrating that something like that would follow you around, but it needs to follow you around. That's necessary. It's necessary for men to realize, oh, this is going to affect areas of my life that I never expected. Oh, this is going to come up when I never expected it to come up. It needs to be a wake-up call instead of just, oh, I can push this under the rug. It came up, but I'll deal with it. I'll deal with it and I'll get it I'll get rid of it, and I'll keep it in my past, and it'll be fine. It sucks that it came up, but I'll take care of it. It needs to hurt somebody's life, and you know what? It needs to negatively affect your life for you to learn. And if he's not learning the lesson, nobody's learning the lesson. If he is not learning the lesson himself of, wow, what I did that many years ago still affects me, still affects my job, which I never expected, then nobody's going to learn it. You know, you're not seeing consequences. You're not feeling what women are feeling. You know, you're not feeling that. And if you don't understand that struggle to defend yourself, I think it's a shame that it's so difficult for women to defend. But then when you want to be elected and something like this comes up, it really didn't take much of a fight for him to be elected. Like, it wasn't much of an issue for him, which it needed to be an issue for him to change things. And it's just saying, you know, things aren't going to change for women. And that's frustrating, especially when you're young and you're hoping that it'll get better for you. I don't know if I have that hope. I don't know if it will get better for me. I don't feel like it.
Yeah. Even though, like, when you were saying about, earlier someone was saying how probably these things happen. So even the probability not being enough to have a consequence or a setback or any type of repercussion is just like a kind of big F you. You know what I'm saying? The probability. You know what I'm saying? And I hate to be this person, but I just think that it has a lot to do with having this white superiority to people. And it's something that is almost embedded in society, that one, the man is above the woman, and the white man is definitely above everyone. You know what I'm saying? And that just sucks, because there has been cases, in some instances, where a woman accuses someone of doing something and it does affect their football career. They're no longer playing in the NFL or the NBA. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, then at that sense, what are we holding to the accountability of certain men? You know what I'm saying? And that just sucks. That it's just like, what do we do now? Do women keep fighting? Do we just stay silent? What do we do? What position do we put ourselves in to be a better community, or to be a better society, or to regain that hope, or regain that empathy for women? You know what I'm saying? And another thing you were saying about jobs, I do believe that there's a lot of instances where sexual harassment does come back to haunt men in their playing fields, because it's a part of your character. The things you do tell who you are. You know what I'm saying? And why would someone want someone who sexually harassed a woman and doesn't find any harm in it, hasn't admitted to it, doesn't even give an apology, and has a family, has a wife, has a daughter, you know what I'm saying, and still doesn't think to themselves, what if this happened to them? That feels like there's a lack of empathy for women. So if someone carries that characteristic of lacking empathy for a woman and a woman within his family, then why would we want him representing something bigger? Why would we want that to be a character of someone who we watch on television every day in the NBA or the NFL or MLB, you know what I'm saying, as an athlete or as an artist, you know what I'm saying? Who would want to listen to someone's music, you know what I'm saying, who's like that? So it goes back to the government. Who would want, that's when you were saying about the Senate saying that it doesn't matter. Why would it not matter? This is a part of who this man is, you know what I'm saying? Like, this happened, even though it was long ago. It happened. You know what I'm saying? There was, and the fact that there's no admittance or there's no, like, there's really no feeling towards the situation, you know what I'm saying? It's all sympathy from within himself, you know what I'm saying? It's like, woo me instead of, I'm so sorry that you're going through this, you know what I'm saying? Even if you didn't do it, there's still no empathy there for women who are. You know what I'm saying? I never once heard him say anything or anyone who was accused of these sexual allegations saying, and for the women who are, I'm so sorry that this is happening to you. There is no feeling there still. So there is still no characteristic that they have this empathy. And that's what makes it even worse, because it really doesn't even matter to them.
I think she makes a great point with saying how he never once, it was all about, well, this is horrible for me. And I think that how he behaved during the trial was really not representative of anything that should be on the Supreme Court. Like, it was very much not just like, oh, I don't want this to be happening, I'm trying to move up in my career. It was very much, this is beneath me. Like, this is beneath me to have this happen. Right. He gave off that impression of, I don't have the time to deal with you and your feelings, and it's all about what I went through and how I don't think it should affect what my job should be. And it's like, you know what? Your job at this point is irrelevant. It's not about your job. It's about why this isn't being taken seriously. And you're sitting up here acting like it shouldn't be happening to you when you're the cause of it. And how he came across was I don't think that should be the temperament that anybody should want on the Supreme Court. Yeah. That doesn't seem like someone who can keep it cool when they're trying to make a hard choice.
Yeah. And another thing is that, women to make these accusations, to say if she lied, why would she lie? But for women who say that they get themselves caught up in a situation where, oh, I got caught cheating with my husband. This man, actually, I didn't invite him in here. He forced his way in here, or, you know what I'm saying? The people who lie are making excuses, because they caught themselves up in a certain situation where they were actually wrong. But these women who are accusing Kavanaugh, why would they lie?
Yeah, there's no
there's no reason for them to just say, oh, I'm going to wake up today and ruin this man's life and put myself in a position of humiliation and put myself out there to make me look bad for the deprivation of this man's character. That's not That's not a 1-for-1. Everyone's losing here. They're not gaining anything from putting themselves in this position. They're not putting themselves in a position to build a better business or to get money. Someone's paying them under the that's ridiculous. That whole idea that these women are just making this stuff up is ridiculous.
I think it's funny to look at culturally. I don't know if you guys watch Saturday Night Live, but they did a little sketch on it, and it's just funny to think that's real. You could make a joke about it, and it's funny, and I thought it was hilarious, but then you don't think it's funny a couple minutes after you watch it. It was of the trial. They did a mock trial, and it was super funny. They did a parody of his character, and
Kavanaugh's character.
and how he talked during the trial. And I think it's funny for a second, and then you're like, no, it's not.
Yeah.
You're like, actually, that's kind of scary because that's not a joke. That's kind of exactly how it was. So it's just, I don't know. It's kind of scary.
I took it to a 15 real quick. And it's on my social media, I don't really post a lot of political things, and I don't really deem supporting Dr. Ford as political. It's just me supporting a survivor. And I just posted a picture of her saying, support the survivors. And I had at least 5 boys who were either 2 years older than me or my age and say, how can you support her as a journalist and not know the end result and just jump to the conclusion? And, you're a bad journalist if you think this. And it was from one of my former colleagues. And that just made me so upset. You're 20 years old and you're getting mad at me for supporting another woman. Doesn't that just reinstate that stigma,
right.
That men have this power? And I didn't even know what to say to him, because it's if you're that far down the rabbit hole of, oh, it's Brett Kavanaugh, I'm going to support him. There's just not much you can say.
And who are you to tell me what to believe? Who are you to tell me, she's a liar? I'm going to believe what I want to believe. Everybody at the end of the day is going to believe what they want to believe and fight for what they believe in. And that's just the way of the world. Now, nobody can, I feel like everything has a just to it.
Yeah.
For everyone and everyone's perspective, no matter how dumb or smart it may be.
This is a question the New York Times podcast did not include. I want to ask you whether you think your answers to these questions would have been different if you were still in high school. All of you have been out of high school for 2 to 5 years. In what way do you think your reaction is different today than it might have been if you were in high school and around the same age as Brett Kavanaugh's accuser was at the time of the alleged attack?
So I know for me, my reaction would have been the same, but in high school I wasn't quite as willing to talk about it. But I know that it would have had the same effect now that I am no longer constantly in an environment where I am told that, oh, you're too young to really to feel like that. Now that I'm told you go out into the world, I was at school for 2 years, not at home. I met people who had opinions that were not the same. And I know that for me, that gave me the chance to be able to speak up and have a voice. And I think for me, I would have felt the same way, but now I'm willing to talk about it. I'm willing to say, you know what, that's not right. That's not okay. And if we're being honest, if I could go back in time, I would say speak up, because if that's something you want to talk about, then talk about it.
And I think also, to piggyback on what you're saying, when you're in high school, you may be thinking, is this really happening? I don't really know if this is sexual assault. I don't really know if this is like a thing that's happening, or if it's just the things that people are talking about, or how serious it really is, because you're in the heat of it. So you see things that very temporary at that age. So you may think it's just young people being young people. And then you get older and you realize, oh, this is something that happens all the time, not just in high school. And then you're more passionate about speaking up, because you realize it's a life thing. It's not just a high school thing.
And like, if we start telling high schoolers that you should be talking about this, then maybe it would change something. It would change that stigma. And personally, I think I'd have the same opinion, just because, I think that most of us are raised to defend ourselves, like with your pepper spray, with your clothing, how you talk, things like that. But I'm also raised to say that is wrong, to speak out, especially if it's sexual violence, because that is just so traumatizing to people.
Yeah, I think that most people would say, I guess it's been 2 years, I'm getting old, graduated from high school, I think most people would say, like, yeah, I will have the same feelings, like, yeah, this will be me, I'll probably be more infuriated and stuff like that. But honestly, I can't honestly say that for myself. Because in high school, I wasn't really like, I wasn't as much in tune with my activist attitude that I am now.
Yeah.
As I have came out into the real world and kind of out of this shielded area, because high school can be very shielded depending on your environment and what you're around. Then once you get out into the real world and you're seeing things for what they really are and nothing's really been sugar-coated, and you see, like, it's kind of different, and you gain this different attitude about most things. And I think that I was always in tune with, like, being African American, but being a woman and being in different workspaces and being around different people who had different opinions than me, because high school, you know what I'm saying, if somebody has a strong opinion, you're not really going to say anything too much about it. You're kind of just going to hide your different feeling. But in college, people aren't afraid of having different opinions, because they become more comfortable with themselves as an adult and being who they are, and they become stronger believers in what they believe in, so they're more comfortable with expressing that. So now I find myself in a different position than I was in high school mentally, and I guess that's a good thing, knowing the growth, but it's also a bad thing, because I feel like when you don't know, then it's worse. You know what I'm saying? When you don't have that type of knowledge to what really goes on, you're kind of just like, oh, la-da-da-da-da. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, my answer probably wouldn't have been the same as it is today, about 3 years ago.
I want to thank the four of you for participating in this special edition of the Riverhawk Report podcast today, and thank you to all of you who listened. This podcast was produced by Sharon O'Malley, faculty advisor for the Campus Current, the student newspaper of Anne Arundel Community College. Music by Epidemic Sound. This is Daniel Nickerson.